Okay, today we're going to be talking about frames with the FANUC robot. Specifically, we'll look at setting the tool center point for the tool frame on the robot. Just to go over what frames mean, remember frames are Cartesian coordinate systems in the robot. They're basically 3 axis coordinate systems, X, Y, and Z. There are 5 different types of frames or jogging methods with the FANUC robot. We have first the world frame, which has the origin on the robot or inside the robot. We have tool frames, user frames, which can be defined by the user. We'll see that in a second. And then we have remote tool center point frames, and finally jog frames. So coordinate systems are what define how the robot will move. Whatever coordinate system selected will define in what method you move or jog the robot. Like I said, the 5 coordinate systems, joint, world, tool, user, and jog frame. You can toggle between those frames by pushing the coordinate button, C-O-O-R-D button, on the teach pendant. That will take you into different frames for jogging. Also remember that FANUC uses the right-hand rule. So as most robot systems do, the right-hand rule defines where your X, Y, Z axis are. So if you're at the origin, your index finger points in the direction of positive X. The next finger, your middle finger, will point in the direction of positive Y, and then your thumb is pointing in positive Z, which when we're talking about the world coordinate system, down here, Z would be in the up direction relative to the robot. So the world coordinate system is defined as the origin within the robot. The origin is located on the x-axis, or the center of rotation in joint 1, projected up to the height of joint 2. So it's the center of rotation for joint 1 at the level of axis for joint 2. That's the origin and world frame, and then it's defined, the X, Y, Z are defined from that point using the right-hand rule like I explained before. So the X direction would be straight out from the robot. The Y would be to the robot's positive Y would be to the robot's left if you're looking from behind the robot. And of course the Z axis would be straight up from that point. When you're jogging in world, it will move the end of the robot relative to this origin in the X, Y, Z direction. Positional data in the robot, the location of position is expressed in 3 dimensions, the X, Y, Z dimension. Those are measured in millimeters from the origin in each of those dimensions. So when you get the positional data, if you're in one of those coordinate systems, it's going to give you X, Y, Z position data. The tool frame is, the default point of origin is the center of the faceplate. So the faceplate at the end of the robot, that is the default point for the tool frame origin. You can define your own tool frames based on the tools you're using. After the tool is defined, then it is referred to as the tool center point, or TCP. You can have robots with multiple tools that would have multiple TCPs or multiple tool center points that you can define for the robot. And when you select the tool coordinate motion, the TCP becomes the point of origin. That tool center point is now your origin, and the XYZ is defined from that point. There are 3 methods to define your tool frame when you're defining a new tool frame. The first method is called the 3-point method. And the 3-point method defines only the location of the tool center point when the values cannot be directly entered. The positive Z direction is going to move towards the work with the tool. So that's kind of the most common and easiest method to define a tool. When you don't know the exact dimension of the tool, you can use the 3-point method. The next method is the 6-point method. It's the same as the 3-point method, but allows you to specify what the X and Y or X and Z direction are for the tool. And then the third method is the direct entry method. When you know the tool dimensions, you know them precisely, then you can enter those numbers directly into the tool frame settings. So that is a direct entry or tool frame. All right, that's it for the lecture. Now we're going to go to the robot, and I'm going to show you how to define a user frame for your robot. Okay, so here we are at the robot, and what we're going to do first is we have the teach pendant. We're going to power up the robot right here at the circuit breaker. We have the robot powering up and booting up. Just while it's booting up, I want to go over some of the safety features again. Remember, we have, first of all, the dead man switch. To jog the robot, you must squeeze the dead man switch. You must have one hand on the dead man switch to move the robot, and you want to give it just enough pressure to give 1 click so you have that center position. We also have the E-stop on the teach pendant. There's an E-stop here. We also have an E-stop on the control panel. So this will stop the robot immediately when pressed. Again, this is only for emergency situations because, like I said before, it'll damage the robot if you use this too much. So the preferred method to stop the robot is right here, the hold button. So in a non-emergency situation, hold will stop the motion of the robot. Especially if it's in automatic mode, you can stop it with the hold button. Okay, so we have the robot booted up. I'm going to now go over the procedure for teaching the robot a user frame. Now, a user frame is a frame that you define. So if you have like an object in your work cell and you want to jog the robot relative to that object, I've placed a box here as you can see in the work cell. We're going to define a user frame to jog the robot relative to that object. So the first step is to push the menu key, and then you're going to go to Setup, which is item 6. We're going to go then to F1 for type. We're going to go down to frames, select frames, and if you're not in, we're now in tool frame, we can select user frame by pushing F3 for other, and 3 selects user frame. Now notice I already have a user frame defined. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out that user frame. So I'm going to push F4 for clear, yes to confirm, yes to clear the comment, and now we have a clear user frame number 1. I'm going to enter this frame in user frame number 1. So we're going to push now F2 for detail, and then F2 for method, and we're going to select the 3-point method, which is the first method available. And now we're in our 3-point method setup screen. So first thing we do is give it a comment. Maybe you want to name this user frame. We're going to call this the box frame. So I'm going to hit enter to enter a comment. I'm going to select the keypad option. So I'm going to scroll down to keypad, push F5, takes me to the keyboard, and using the touch screen, I'm going to type in box frame. So you can see now in the comment we have that named as our box frame. Now we're going to go down to the origin point. I'm going to define my origin point for this frame. So what I have to do now is jog, and I want to shift to world mode. So using the coordinate key, we're going to shift over to world mode for jogging. And if you watch, I'm going to jog my end of my tool, which in this case the marker, I'm going to jog that to my origin point on the box. So I'm going to use my world jogging to jog the robot to the corner of the box. I'm going to use the corner of the box as my origin. Right about there. We'll call that the origin of my coordinate system for this. So once you get to that point, you're going to hold down Shift and F5 to record that point. You notice it now says origin point recorded. The next thing we have to define is our X direction point. So I'm going to move my arrow keys down to that X direction point, and I'm going to jog the robot now to a point in the X direction. I want this side of the box, the side of the box is pointed kind of off to the right as my X axis. So I'm going to shift and jog over to a point on the edge of the box using my world, I'm still in world jog mode. So using my X and Y jog keys, I'm going to jog over to a point along that X axis. Okay, once I'm on that point, again, I'm going to hold down Shift, press F5 for record, and now my X direction point has been recorded. The last part of this is to go to the Y direction and record my Y direction point. So I'm going to Shift, jog using the world mode again, jog to a point on the Y axis. I want my Y axis to be this part of the box that's going out towards us. So I'm going to jog using my X, Y keys. So I'm on the Y axis. You have to go about 2 or 3 inches in each direction is adequate for defining your X and Y direction. So that looks good. Now I'm going to hold down Shift, push F5, and notice they switched to used. All points are now used, and I've defined that user frame. User frame number 1, which I've called box frame, is now relative to this box. So to test it, what we're going to do is we're going to hold down Shift and coordinate, and you see I have tool, jogger, and user frame. I want to make sure that I have user frame 1 selected, which I do. If that wasn't user frame 1, I would select number 1 to make sure I'm in that user frame. Now I want to jog it in that frame, so I push the coordinate button until I see user appear on my jog selection. Now let's see if it jogs in that frame. So if you watch me jog it now, if I do -Y, it's going to follow the edge of the box. If I do +X, it will follow that edge of the box. So all my jogging now is relative to that user frame that I created, and the origin is at the corner of the box. I could do +Z, and it will go up. -Z will still go down. So once I've defined my X and Y direction, Z is defined for me. That is the thumb direction, that is up and down. So that's how you define your user frame on the FANUC robot.